Because when I started, it was very much how a woman looked. You were meant to be feminine and compliant and grateful. And some of that's moved on and some of that hasn't. And, you know, women are still far more likely to have comments about how they look than a male athlete. Sponsorship, the products they're offered to advertise, are quite often seen as more feminine. So it'll be more beauty products than men. So actually, you know, there's a few football clubs that are challenging that in a minute, and they're going down the line of advertising facial products. But it's a real challenge in that so much of a female athlete is based on how they look, not just about how they play sport. And the way women in sport are put down is really interesting, because it's, well, you don't play like the men. And it's not aggressive and it's not in your face. And the argument back is quite hard to articulate, because, well, why should we have to play like the men? Why can't we just play like women? And that's been used around sports like football and rugby and boxing, because it's like, well, why? Well, you might get hurt. And my argument is that's women's choice to decide whether they play a sport where they might get hurt, because men are allowed to choose whether they do those sports, but women necessarily aren't allowed to make those decisions. And for me, it's about that freedom of choice. We shouldn't have men telling us what we can and we can't do. But also it's interesting around some of the rules and the way that actually all athletes are brought into sport. You're meant to be compliant, you're meant to be agreeable, you're not meant to speak out. The contracts, what you can say at certain times, when you can protest. Actually, most international rules don't allow any political protest. And we've seen the athletes who do make a political protest are quite often treated very unfairly. There is a discussion around at what point you make a political protest. Should it be on the podium? Shouldn't it be? You know, there's a whole range of discussions on that. But actually, what is expected of most athletes and female athletes is you just keep quiet. You just don't say anything. And you behave yourself, because the words and the language used around women in sport are also quite interesting, because to put women down, they'll say, oh, she's a bit on the edge, or she's a bit shaky, where it's not encouraged to be strong and tough. And those are things that men are meant to do. And again, some of those things are really hard to fight against. I remember listening to an interview with a woman, female athlete, and it was like, she's a bit breathy. No, she's passionate and cares, and it's those really subtle things that we need to find a way of standing up to and fighting, because, you know, women should be allowed to play sport and be physically active. And it's interesting sometimes that, you know, there are issues in terms of maybe some, you know, a lot of people prefer to play team sports and not. But certainly when I was growing up in sport, it was like, well, women like team sports because then they don't stand out. Again, it's all that really sort of low level language, which is tough to do. And I think, you know, issues of being gay in sport is really difficult. It's hard for any athlete to come out, but certainly my experience of friends, female friends in sport over the years, they're much more likely to be asked about their sexuality. And there is no place in any interview, you know, when someone's come off field to play, to ask what someone's sexuality is. You know, that there may be an interest at some other point, but actually I don't think there is. But women were much more likely to be asked those sorts of questions. And actually in different athletes, female athletes I know from around the world, when they first came into sport at elite level, that was even part of their media training, which was how to deal with a journalist who asked them a very intrusive question about their sexuality. And you go, wow, that's just interesting. Has it got better? Some of that's got better, but it's still not where it needs to be. It's still not at the point where there's true equality. There's not equality in sponsorship, in media coverage, in the number of women in coaching, in administration. And actually women have a lot to offer. They sometimes don't want to have to wait 30 years to get in the position where they can sit on that committee, because they've got other things they could be doing with their time, and they've got other things they're impatient to change. So I think it's important to understand the history of where we come from, to see where we are now and to see where things need to change. But there is still a lot that needs to change for women in sport.